Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we have to talk about something happening at Disney, or basically the same thing happening at Disney. You see, they're doubling down on the same bloated budgets and tired sequels that has already burned through hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, in fact. And the 2026 slate that I've talked about already last week in a different video, which you can find up there, is, of course, not a course correction, which they desperately need. It's just another high-stakes gamble on a broken system that we're going to get into more details about in the course of this video. But for today, we're just going to be exposing how the corporate suits keep ignoring the audience and the audience fatigue, chasing agendas over entertainment while Hollywood money just keeps burning. It's like they think they have an infinite supply. So stick around to the end for the breakdown that nobody can ignore. Let's dive in. Here we go. So when Disney unveiled their massive 2026 movie slate, and of course along with that Marvel and everything else that went with it, some people got excited. I had to ask why, because I've seen this movie before and so have you. And looking at the numbers, the real question is always going to be simple. Is anyone actually steering the ship? Despite the theatrical losses we've already broken down in previous films, as I said, I talked about the $415 million in that video that was linked up there. They're already on their way to losing even more money. And of course, they finished the year with an opportunity to lose a giant amount of money. It's clear that audience fatigue is still there for the bad movies and the bad ideas that are coming out of the House of Mouse. And yet they're doubling down on the exact same strategy that caused the damage in the first place. Girl bosses, witchcraft, identity politics, and so on and so forth. They're truly 100% blind to the market, and I think that that is driving not just moviegoers away, but pretty much every level of Disney is suffering. Whether it be Disney minus the theme parks, I mean, it's starting to creep everywhere. Or is it possible there's a deeper reason for this, that they're willing to let the money pit keep burning? Well, that comes around to this question and answer that I don't think anybody there is, actually discussing. Let's look at the high stakes narrative. 2026 was supposed to be the comeback year for the Disney company. Instead, it's shaping up to be one of their most expensive mistakes yet. And we've analyzed the upcoming releases, and the patterns are undeniable. When you look at the bloated budgets, the recycled sequels, and the Iger-era plan, the corporate agendas seem to be taking priority in a way that really is detrimental to the company's future. There's no arguing that. There's no saving it. And since the days of Bob Chapek, they've really needed a reset. Iger wasn't that reset, and it turns out neither is Josh. The priority here should and has always been to entertain people, which Disney stopped doing somewhere around the presidential ambitions of Bob Iger circa, 2013, 14, 15. And that seems to coincide with a lot of other things that were going on inside of Hollywood, the pivot towards wokeness and all the other things that happened in the film industry, including the giant DEI pivot of the Academy itself. But instead of this great comeback based on this new schedule, they're ramping up or shaping up to have one of the worst years ever, at least in my opinion. And what does that tell you? Well, they haven't learned a single lesson. And there have been plenty of them. If you just look at last year's slate alone, even this year's slate's not blowing anybody's hair back. And outside of Toy Story 5 and Devil Wears Prada 2, which we're going to get into those films in a moment, there really isn't much there. And with all of their recent failures, it's time for us to expose the internal decisions that are driving this legendary studio straight into a brick wall. And I don't think anybody can argue with that. So for now, let's move on to the insider reality check. As fans and as people who have supported this company and many other studios all along, we have to stop falling for the hype cycles and flashy trailers that are being presented by many of these studios, because oftentimes that's the best they've got. Disney's 2026 schedule is a desperate gamble on a broken system that they actually contributed in destroying themselves. And while the suits at the top are trying to pretend that everything is fine, the data shows that they're still chasing the same tired formulas, and audiences are just not interested anymore. In fact, they've rejected all of this stuff for long enough for everybody to realize that the jig is up and there's no more reboot quills that can be tolerated anymore. Today, all we can look forward to is these billion-dollar bets that are destined to underperform in a way that, well, we've never anticipated, and maybe they didn't either, and how Disney is choosing to ignore the fans in favor of the failing status quo. And ultimately, that's one of the worst gambles they could take. Speaking of which, the massive 2026 gamble itself. Now, let's talk some real money. The cumulative production budget for Disney's major 2026 theatrical slate has already exceeded $1.7 billion to date, which we've talked about before. And that's before a single marketing dollar is applied. And the A&P for Disney is always top shelf. They're always spending enormous amounts of money. In fact, they routinely figure in at like 50 to 100% of the production number when they're going in to advertise any given project, especially on the tent poles. So when you add it all together, you're looking at a total investment that can actually easily push past the $3 billion just this year. Again, we're only a little over halfway through the year, and these numbers don't get much better. Toy Story 5 alone carried a reported $250 to $275 million in production budget. The live-action Moana came in at $250 million in production budget, and it was awful. Then you had Avengers Doomsday, which is tracking to spend over $400 million by the time they're done getting that thing put together. And then you even have animated films costing way too much, like Hexed, which is an animated original based on things that the fans have widely rejected multiple times before. Witchcraft and an uneven storyline. The only thing that may be going for that film is it seems to be kind of a Harry Potter style clone. That thing is definitely in the $200 million range, maybe more. These aren't modest bets. These aren't things that are, being approached with any kind of care or anything that has approached due diligence in weighing what the ramifications can be if you have this many films of this much money fail. Because Disney, never used to have to worry about failure. And of course, all you have to do is notice what's missing here. And it's the most telling thing of all. The original storytelling is gone. Outside of maybe Hexed, again, borrowing heavily from Harry Potter, everything else leans very, very heavily on decades-old IP. Some of it worn out because it hasn't been used in so long, or it's been overused. And the schedule is built almost entirely on aging franchises in what used to be safe sequels. Of course, I'm talking about Toy Story 5 when I mention that. The live-action Moana remake, that wasn't done without some kind of consideration, not realizing that maybe live action, it wouldn't work very well, which we found out very quickly, especially with The Rock not really being The Rock anymore. So The Mandalorian and Grogu demonstrated for everybody who was paying attention that Star Wars is dead, at least as far as Disney Star Wars is concerned. And as I look at it, the next Avengers chapter is in real trouble, whether or not you have Robert Downey Jr. or not. So this is a classic defensive strategy, because in business, you only have offensive strategies or defensive strategies. This is an offense. This is defense. And this is bad news because you're so risk averse that you're being defensive in everything that you do. Executives are seemingly, based on this strategy, terrified of market volatility, but they're in the midst of it. They have no control over it, despite them feeling like they might. And they reach for the most familiar brands, which is what Iger did on his way out the door. So anything that was on the shelf that was a winner before is fodder against risking anything new. And the problem? Familiarity does not automatically equal success. Doesn't even meet up to demand anymore. And I think that's something that Disney has to adjust to. And I have to tell you, they're not the only studio. Others have fallen into this trap before. And speaking of traps, the sequel trap and audience fatigue. Something that I think we all are familiar with is the feeling we have when we see a new trailer. Some kind of dread. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And this is where the data here gets absolutely brutal. Recent live-action remakes have shown clear diminishing returns. We've just been shown that in the Moana live-action remake. Now, Stitch did pretty well, but at the same time, it's a beloved property, a built-in audience that's older who are introducing it to their own kids. They really didn't let Moana sit on the shelf long enough, and certainly not long enough after a Moana 2. In fact, you don't have to look too far back to look at another failed live action in Snow White. It lost the studio easily $170 million. And of course, the live action Moana, which I mentioned before, is, as of right now, sitting just a little over $228 million worldwide. That's against an enormous budget of $250 million, not counting any marketing, which was incredibly heavy for that film. In fact, it was commented as such, which means they spent more than you could possibly expect. It's projected to easily lose 9 figures, and it could be a substantial 9 figures at that. And yet, the same pattern shows up again and again. It doesn't matter what studio it's coming out of from Disney, it's the same thing. Marvel's 2025, you don't have to go back farther than that, to see where Captain America Brave New World was a disaster, along with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. That First Steps movie and many of the others underperformed in a way I don't think Disney was prepared for. They dropped enormous amounts of money on things they thought were going to be guaranteed winners in franchises that were already kind of shaky and not performing where the franchise highs had been. Marvel hasn't done a good thing, in my opinion, since Endgame. Is Doomsday going to fix that? I don't know. The only thing that seems to have worked was Deadpool and Wolverine, which nobody like Feige had control of, since it was greenlit under Chapek and a green light given to Levy to do basically what he wanted. And then you have, of course, the things out of their control like Spider-Man. Brand New Day is out there proving that you can still do superheroes, you just can't do bad superheroes, which I think is what we've been suffering for so long. Yet, the 2026 slate still piles more of the same on the calendar. And that's what the rest of the year looks like. Now, Gen Z here is going to be the focus, or they should be. Gen Z, Alpha, they're voting with their attention, with their wallets, and with their parents' and grandparents' wallets, unfortunately. And they're moving toward creator-led content, things that are shorter form storytelling and properties that feel current rather than recycled nostalgia. And while nostalgia can get you a long way, especially in a 4-quadrant film, when was the last time you've seen a 4-quadrant do that well? Outside of Toy Story this year, which is the only billion-dollar effort that Disney had in 2026, do you really think outside of Avengers Doomsday we get anything else? I mean, green lighting a 5th Toy Story and another live-action remake of a film that already was successful was not a genius move. It was a safe one. And just a couple of years after Moana came out, why would you even do a live action at this point? Give it some time, as I mentioned before. And audiences aren't stupid. This is essentially signs of creative bankruptcy. But Disney's not alone. Everybody's suffering from that right now. The problem is these maneuvers and strategies are essentially dressed up to mask the lack of creativity inside these studios. These franchises reached a logical, emotional conclusion, and rebooting them from years ago doesn't always work. It's not going to hit the same way, and it definitely isn't in the same world. And that's the other problem that I think Disney and other studios don't realize. Films are of their time. things are of their time. You cannot go back again. Somebody famous said that one time. And right now, the financials here speak more about protecting quarterly earnings reports than they do about earnest storytelling. And that's when we dive into a bigger problem, the bloated budget crisis. And this is the part that should keep shareholders awake at night. I know it's kept me up at night because the insufficient pipeline, the inefficient pipeline, the massive overhead, and the fix and post mentality that modern Disney tentpoles now routinely rely on. You're looking at budgets and marketing that require $700 million to $1 billion worldwide just to break even. Who finds that to be a reasonable expectation as a business model? I want to meet them because I think they're insane. Of course, then we jump into theater splits, and that means the studio itself only keeps roughly half of what they earn at the box office. That's not enough money. Marketing is eating into that particular layer, and reshoots, VFX overhauls, and star salaries are starting to really compound the problem. Do you know how much it costs to hire The Rock now? And he's not even truly a movie star. He's never really led anything that was of great success. He's been good at ensembles, but that's a discussion for another day. And if you contrast that to a leaner 2025 and the successes that came from that for Disney, and of course outside the Disney machine itself, films that prioritize script and character over spectacle still found audiences. And horror is making a massive comeback. Those movies didn't need billion-dollar global haul to make it look like winners. They were winners because they didn't spend a whole lot of money up front to begin with. Disney model does, and that's why it's struggling so mightily. Every time a high-budget title misses, the losses get socialized across the rest of the slate and the streaming service, which hurts the streaming service because it doesn't retain anybody. Why do you hang on to Disney Minus when all they're releasing is garbage in theaters? Why is all their trash television projects out there, and with the name Star Wars or Marvel on them, failing so much and never showing up in the Nielsen ratings? And of course, all of this ends up in a situation where the consumer ends up paying more at the box office in subscription fees and in the parks just to keep the money flowing, which again is how they fuel that money pit. It certainly isn't in the media they're producing, and that's another big problem. So, in conclusion, I'll say it this way, and I'm sure you'll understand where I'm coming from. The House of the Mouse isn't learning, it's just doubling down. And the 2026 slate just represents proof of concept. In fact, looking forward into 2027, I don't think it's going to get any better. But hey, those are my thoughts. What are yours? That's right. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Are you seeing this House of Mouse on fire like I am? Are there other studios out there that are following the same failed blueprint or business model? And if so, do you think they're doing any better? Again, your thoughts are as good as mine, so let me know what they are down in the comments section below. While you're there, hit the thumbs up button, double check you're still subscribed. If this is your first or your 1000th time, hit the subscribe button. And let's go ahead and hit the bell icon to turn on all notifications. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya. Hopefully seeing something good, not something from Disney.